Hello and welcome back to the Watford Way podcast, the podcast where we cover all the latest Watford news that's happened within the past month. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Finn, who's a Watford fan based up near Birmingham. Finn, how are you doing today?
I'm all right, thank you, mate. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. You looking forward to the new season?
If last season's anything to go by, then no. But I am hopeful.
I am very hopeful as well, especially with the last signing Watford have made very recently, which we'll obviously touch on later on in the podcast. And lots has happened within the past month in regards to Watford. And we'll start off with the new kits, which have gone down. I wouldn't say very well. I think the home kit is definitely more favoured than the away kit.
Yeah.
Quickly, Finn, obviously, I'm sure you've seen both of them, the home and away kit. I think there's a third kit that is set to come within the next week as well. Are you a fan of the home kit this year?
The home kit I really like. I thought the sponsor is a bit big and a bit in your face, but
Yeah.
it's no worse than steak. So I've got over that. The away kit, it's just a bit plain, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of the home kit, to be honest. Playing the away kits, it's not bad, but it's just average. You know what I mean?
You know
It's
what?
just
When we first saw the leaks from, I think it was China, like some sort of Chinese factory, we saw some photos on social media. It looked a bit iffy then. I have to say, when I saw it on the players, and obviously the players are very fit individuals, they have great bodies. When it was put on them, it does look a lot better than maybe if I wore it, let's say, or John, 50-year-old John from down the road wearing it as well. So um, I do think it looks a lot better on the players. I'm not a fan of like the collar, like the button collar. I think we've kind of had them in the past. I've not been a big fan of them, but as you say, I do prefer the home kit over the away kit. One more thing to touch on in regards to the kit spin. I think they've raised the prices by about £10 this year. They used to retail for £50 just for the basic kit without any player names or anything. Now they're £60 in the Hornet shop. I assume you're not very happy with that.
no, no. I'm broke. I can't be affording that.
No,
Oh
no.
God, you have to start saving. It's
Yeah, I
a very
saw someone on Twitter as well. I think they've personalised the shirt, and that was like another £20 on top. So if you want a player name on the back and a Watford shirt, it's going to cost you in the region of about £80, which I don't think is necessarily the best way to go about business. My advice would be always wait until about April, May time. They sell off the shirts for about 25 quid. And yeah, you can get the shirts much cheaper
yeah.
around that time. The big bit of what the news spin we'll move on to, which broke either yesterday or the day before. I can't quite remember. My memory is deceiving me. Daniel Bachmann was appointed as Watford captain. Now, of course, we've had many captains in the past, most notably Troy Deeney when he was at Watford. That then moved on to Tom Cleverley. And now Daniel Bachmann is the Watford captain. I believe he's one of the longest serving current members of the first team squad alongside Ken Sema. What are your thoughts on Daniel Bachmann being appointed as Watford captain? Because the reaction on social media, I think, was maybe a little bit too over the top, a little bit unnecessary. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that whole situation?
Quite frankly, I cannot fathom why it's been done. Um, he's he's just a big shouty man, and he just shouts at people a lot. But then again, I can shout at people a lot. That doesn't mean I'm a good captain. But yeah, at the end of the day, he's the captain now, so we've got to get behind him, no matter who it is. Personally, I think I'd have given it to Ryan Porteous because he's a big shouty man that knows what he's shouting about, if you know what I mean. Um,
He
uh,
is, yes.
yeah, the whole leadership group that we've been that's been appointed, I guess, is it's a bit of a strange one.
Yeah,
There's
let me bring this up on my Twitter actually. So I tweeted this out on the Watford Way when it was first announced. And this was probably the most controversial section of the whole announcement, really, this whole leadership group that had been announced in. So as you mentioned, Danny Batman was announced as the club captain. And then as part of this, overall group within the squad, you had Ben Hamer, who for me, that's very odd
it
because
is
he's,
odd, isn't it?
Yeah, it is odd. Then you had Wesley Hoot, which maybe, you know, I can kind of see Wesley Hoot is an experienced professional. He's played in the Premier League before at Southampton. He's a centre back, albeit his performances last season were good, but I wouldn't say they were exceptional. Jake Livermore is in that group, as well as Imran Louza and Ken Sema. So yeah, out of them, you know, players I've listed there, you know, who would you say stands out to you as the clear leader? Because I can't see you know, a Troy Deeney-esque type leader. Now, obviously, you can lead in different ways, as you say, vocally or through your performances. Yeah, it seems very odd, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going from the angle of leading by example, you've got Ken Sema and Imran Louza, who I think are Ken in particular is an impeccable professional. He does everything right on, maybe not always on, but definitely off the pitch. He does everything right. So if you're going by leading from example, then I think Ken he's a good leader, but I can't. Jake Livermore and possibly Ben Hamer might have a little bit more in the way of experience, but I don't think that necessarily makes them captain material. Jake Livermore, again, he was captain of West Brom for.
Can I ask you quickly about Jake Livermore? Because Finn, we're obviously friends, but I know most of your family are West Brom fans, of
Yeah.
course. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe Jake Livermore's personality and why he was appointed captain at West Brom, and whether he can bring, you know, some of that responsibility to this Watford team?
I mean, I don't know a lot about him, but what I do know is him as a professional. Again, like Ken, he does the right things. He says the right things. Um, and on the pitch, he looks a bit leggy, a bit slow, just a bit off the pace. Um, but having said that, the fact that it took so long for Watford to sign and announce him does give me hope that we actually like properly scrutinised how he played, maybe brought him up to fitness before we signed him. But yeah, as a captain, he's a bit like Kenny, leads by example, and thing is, like you say about Troy, I can imagine Troy like grabbing someone by the scruff of the neck and saying, "You need to get your act together."
Yes, yeah.
I can't imagine a single person in that group doing that, apart from
Well,
maybe.
no, I mean, definitely not Imran Louza or Ken Sema. Maybe Jake Livermore I could see doing that. Wesley Hoot potentially. But yeah, I think goalkeepers as captains you see very rarely, because in terms of their position on the pitch, they're not, you know, they're not central where they can speak to, you know, every player. They're quite far back. Yes, they can observe kind of the game and what's going on. But it will be very difficult for Daniel Bachmann, for example, to get a message to the centre forward, you know, in a key part of the game. But I think that's where I'm coming from my perspective.
The thing about goalkeepers as captains for me is I've played football since I was very young. Again, not at a high level at all, but whenever.
Oh, don't discredit yourself, in.
Yeah, I don't like goalkeepers as captains because, in my opinion, goalkeepers should be the second captain, whether they've got the armband or not. Because, like you say, they see the whole game, they see what's going on, they see what people are doing right, they see what they're doing wrong. But as you say, if there's something right in the opposition box that the captains need to dispute or settle or something, he's going to have to bomb his way right down the other end of the pitch, which, again, it's not the biggest of deals, but it's just not ideal. And the fact that there's two in the first two leadership spots bothers me because, like I say, I just personally don't think goalkeepers as captains is a very good idea. I'd preferably have it as a centre back or a defensive midfielder because they can see most of the game and it's easy for them to get messages across to people. But yeah, like you say, I mean, for Dan himself, it must have been a great day. 5-year contract extension, made club captain of a club he's been at since 2017. So for him personally, I'm really happy for him, and I hope he proves people wrong. But would I have done it? No. Do I trust Ishmael? Yes, I do. If he wants Daniel Bachmann as his captain, that's what he'll be. And I'll be behind him until he does something stupid like kung fu kick someone in the head again.
Yeah, I think that's where I was going to summarise anyway. I mean, obviously, Valerian Ismail himself has named this leadership group. And me and you, Finn, you know, and basically all the other Watford fans are really just observing the situation. You know, we're not in the training ground on a day-to-day basis. We can't see the communication between the players that goes on. We can't see, who stands out as the most vocal in the group. And maybe he's right. Maybe Imran Louza is one of the most vocal players. Maybe Jake Livermore can offer, that leadership aspect to Watford. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, as you said, to summarise, congratulations to Dan on getting the captaincy, and of course, congratulations to him on receiving his 5-year contract as well. Another big bit of Watford news. There seems to be lots of Watford news happening at the moment after a lull a few weeks ago. Christian Kabasele, again, a very long-serving member of the squad, has gone to Udinese on a permanent transfer, utilising the Watford-Udinese connection once again. Finn, Christian Kabasele, your thoughts and opinions on his time at Watford and, of course, his subsequent move to Italy?
I love Kaba off the pitch, and I will make a point of I love Kaba off the pitch. On the pitch, I think in the last couple of years, he's a little bit of a liability. In all fairness to him, in the back end of last season, was it last season or the season before? I'm not sure. He did play quite well. Like when he had, it was last season. It was last season when he played with Porteous in particular. I thought he looked really good. But whenever he's on the ball, you feel like he's going to do something silly, or if there's a ball bouncing anywhere near him, I go like that, and I like hold my breath. Like, oh god,
the whole stadium takes a deep intake of breath. Yeah,
I think again, like I say, he was a brilliant ambassador. Had everything to do with the women's team at Watford, which I think is really important. If there was a role in the club for Kaba after football, I'd be his first advocate if there's some sort of liaison job going. Yeah, I'd love him. As I say, I love Kaba, but it was time for him to move on. He was getting old, and we've just got better centre backs at the club now. We've got Matty Pollock up and coming. Obviously, got Porteous, who's quite obviously our best centre back.
Yeah.
Wesley Hoot with a lot of Premier League experience. Sirauta, who was fantastic for us when we went up a few years ago. So yeah, I think he would have been our 5th choice centre back at that point, which wouldn't have suited him at all. I hope he goes to Udinese, and I hope he smashes it, because, like I say, I love Cavaselli, and I think maybe the slower pace of Italian football could suit him, with the balls not bouncing over the top, which is, in my opinion, his weak point. But it is what it is. He's moved now, and I hope he does well. And I'm glad he's. It sounds horrible saying it. I'm glad he's gone. But
yeah.
I do love
I think, as you say, as kind of like a community ambassador to the club. I think he works with the Women of Watford supporters group. He always went to kind of the Junior Hornets days, and I've spoken to him at the stadium numerous times as well. Very nice guy. Infamously, he did that meme, "Local man is pleased," which we all know and all love. But yeah, as you say, I think his time at Watford come to an end. I think his time at Watford probably should have come to an end several years ago, actually, even when we was back in the Premier League. But yeah, as you say, I think it's the right time to move on. We've had a big squad clear out this summer. And yeah, I wish him all the best. We're not going to sit here and, absolutely harass Christian Kabasele or anything like that. But yeah, ultimately, football is a business where you have to win football matches, and you need good players to do that. And I don't think Christian Kabasele was maybe at the right level to do that for Watford anymore, which I think is a fair observation. So Christian, wish you all the best for the future. And yeah, as Finn says, go and smash it in Italy. Some good news, Finn, and some news I think we're all happy about is Jamal Lewis signing for Watford from Newcastle on a 1-year loan with an option to buy at the end of the loan if Watford choose to do so. Me myself, I was very happy about this signing. I've liked Jamal Lewis since he first emerged at Norwich City. You go back to the Norwich City super team, I think it was back in the 2018-19 season. They had Lewis at left back, Max Aarons, Timo Pukki, Emi Buendia, Todd Cantwell was there as well. It was such a good team, especially in the Championship at that time. And yeah, I'm very, very happy to have Jamal Lewis at the club. What are your thoughts on that, Tim?
I think it's a fantastic signing, and not the sort of calibre of signing I was expecting us to make. I think we're clearly in a lot of debt. I was expecting a freebie here, a loan from the back house of Turkey there. But to loan Jamal Lewis from Newcastle, who are in the Champions League, whether he would have played or not, is a very good signing. He's got quality on the ball. He's pretty good defensively. He offers a different sort of fullback to Ferreira and Andrews, the other side. So I think the dynamic of that could work quite well. But yeah, I think he's a very good signing, a bit astute bit of business. I'm intrigued to know how much his buyout clause is at the end of the deal as well. I'm not sure if that's been reported anywhere. I haven't
Yeah,
seen.
I mean, it's not been reported, in the media, but in terms of information around his initial move to Newcastle when it happened. So he moved to Newcastle for about £15 million, which is quite a high transfer fee actually.
Yeah,
Originally, I think Liverpool were interested in him as well as Manchester United. I think personally, I don't think it would maybe be more than 4 to 5 million. And I think maybe there'll be something in there where if Watford get promoted, there might even be an obligation for us to buy him. I know Hamza Chowdhury had a clause where, if Watford chose to do so, we could have brought him. Ultimately, we didn't. But I think this is a deal where it's kind of like you try the player before you buy him. Buy one, get one free almost in the supermarket. So, yeah, for me personally, as you say, he can play left back, he can play left wing back. He's really good going forward. He can score goals. He's good defensively. He's British. He's got good pace. There's not really anything I've said there that makes me go, meh, he might not work at Watford. So, to summarise, Finn, guess you're happy with that?
I'm very happy with it. And one thing I will say is you've got to take into account he's got a year left on his contract. So I don't think it'll be as high as 4 or 5 million. I was thinking maybe £2.5 million, which
Yeah.
I think would be a steal. Yeah, he's a very good signing. I'm very pleased with him.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Another signing Watford have supposedly made but have yet to announce is a Georgian football player who I'm going to attempt to pronounce now for you. I did some research on the internet before I did this podcast, and I believe you pronounce his name as Georgi Chakvedadze. So that's Georgi Chakvedadze. So he's a Georgian attacking midfielder who's been rumoured to have come into Watford for a number of weeks now, actually. He was even photographed wearing a Watford training kit at the training ground. But they've yet to announce his signing, which I find very odd, whether we're maybe waiting for international clearance or maybe there's some paperwork yet to be done. It's an interesting one thing, isn't it? Because we've seen a lot about him on social media. He looks very exciting. He's kind of a similar profile I would describe to Jack Grealish in the way he runs and the way he carries the ball. What are your thoughts on Watford being linked with him? And obviously, we've seen him already photographed in the Watford training kit at the ground. But as I said, we've yet to announce him so far.
My hopes are that him and Tom Ince together will bring back the creativity we lost when Zhao left. Having watched, again, it's just highlights reels, so it's the best of him. But having watched these highlights reels of him, he looks like a good, like you watch some highlight videos and you're like, he's all right. And you watch the video of him and he looks like, oh, he's got a good right foot on him. He dribbles well. He reminds me of I don't know whether it's because they're both Georgian, but who's that Georgian that plays for Napoli? I can't remember his name.
Is it Kvaratskhelia?
That's the one.
Yeah.
He reminds me of him, the way he dribbles, and a bit of Jack Grealish, like you said, which I hadn't thought about before. Yeah, hopefully he brings back some of the creativity we lost. The only negative, as we were speaking about earlier, was did you say 2 ACL injuries he's had?
Yeah, I mean, before we even started recording this podcast, I said to Finn, I was looking at his injury record on transfermarket.com, and he'd been out for nearly 2 years, actually, with 2 separate ACL injuries, which for a footballer, can potentially be career ending, or if not career ending, it can very much affect their performances going forward for the rest of their time when they're I can't speak properly, a professional football player. So yeah, I think that is concerning, Finn, but equally, I think that's kind of the market Watford are looking at. We're looking at to buy kind of players who have really, really high potential. They haven't quite reached it yet, and they kind of need someone to kind of push them there. And maybe this guy, Chakvedadze, is that guy. We'll have to wait and see. But is that concerning to you, the fact that he does have that previous, quite poor injury record?
It's definitely concerning, but like you say, Watford's model for a couple of years ago was buy players from clubs where it hasn't worked out and boost their career. We did it with Delafay, we did it with Capu. So I'm hoping if he can be half as good as either of the players I've just mentioned, it'll be worth it. Interesting that it's on loan as well, because I could have sworn he had a year left on his contract at Ghent. Is it Ghent or Genk? I'm not sure.
Ghent, I believe.
Yeah, I could have
Yeah.
sworn he had a year left on his contract, but I'm not sure. Probably wrong. Yeah, it's interesting that it's a loan either way, because, like you say, he's got the experience, he's got age on his side. The injuries do worry me though, so we'll have to
Yeah,
wait and see.
it's an interesting one. I think like Jamal Lewis, it's kind of try before you buy. You know, I don't think Watford want to commit lots of money towards a singular player this transfer window. Obviously, we all hope we'll get promoted to Premier League, which will supply us with a big influx of money. But if that doesn't happen, I think Watford are being quite wary in regards to how much they spend. And I think the most we've spent Finn so far is that £50,000 release clause to bring Tom Ince to the club. I think Reece Healy was a free transfer. Jake Livermore, as you mentioned, was a free transfer. Matthias Martins was a loan deal from Udinese, again, utilising that relationship. So it's evident we're not spending lots of money. And I think that the way we're doing our business so far is bringing in, you know, very exciting, promising players. Also some experienced players alongside them. And yeah, if Jamal Lewis works out or Chak Vadazzi works out, we can then go, actually, yeah, we'll bring them into the club on a permanent basis. So to summarise, Finn, I think it's a good deal. He's not, I don't think, you know, he's not scored loads of goals in his career. He's contributed, I think the most amount of contributions he had in one season was, I think it was 12 or 13 when I was looking him up. So he looks good. He's coming from a league where the quality of opposition is probably weaker than the Championship. But it's exciting. He's been pictured in the Watford shirt. And yeah, hopefully Watford will announce him very, very soon. And obviously Watford have come to the end of pre-season now. The Championship season starts next Saturday, so less than a week to go until Watford face QPR at home. And pre-season, Finn, has been a different one, I think, for Watford this year, because we've not gone abroad like we have in previous seasons. I think we've been to Austria before. We've been there a number of times, actually. But we've stayed in England this time, and we've played some odd teams, I would say. Not teams that I maybe expected Watford to play. So Watford's pre-season started with us playing Boreham Wood, and I think that ended in a 0-0 draw. We then played Arsenal in a pre-season friendly at Arsenal's training ground, which is next door to Watford, which ended in a 1-1 draw. We then played Crystal Palace, which ended in a 2-1 defeat. And then we beat Peterborough. I wouldn't say Peterborough first team, but Peterborough kind of academy mixed with their first team at Vicarage Road yesterday, 3-0. So Finn, you know, in regards to Watford's pre-season, have you learned anything new about the squad? Or has it been a complete waste of time for you and you just want the Championship season to begin?
What From the game yesterday in particular, what I have learned is Vacuum Bio does actually know that he's supposed to kick the ball in the goal.
Yes.
Because he did score 2 yesterday. I've learned that compared to other seasons, having watched the game at Crystal Palace, it looks like there's a clear philosophy of how Ishmael wants us to play, which is refreshing because we've not had that in a number of years. It looks like he wants us to press hard and high early on. And keep that going throughout the game, which I think it could be of a benefit to us. Well, no, it will be because we actually know how we want to play. Again, going back to the Crystal Palace game, however, something that did strike me was until the Edo Kayembe goal that came out of nowhere, we looked lost in the second half, in particular when Palace stopped sitting on the halfway line very high. As soon as they dropped a bit. Wait, was it the other way around? I can't remember. Either way, in the second half, we looked like we had no plan B, which did concern me because we've had a few coaches like that and they've been figured out. But we'll have to wait and see. We've got at least 6 months until we have to worry about that problem. So we'll cross that bridge when it comes to it. But yeah, it's been an eye opener, I'd say, this pre-season.
Yeah, it has been. I mean, only one match actually opened for Watford fans to attend, which was the first Boreham Wood match. And one point I want to bring up, and one observation I've made and other Watford fans have made as well, and I also want to get your thoughts and opinions on this, Finn, too, is the fact that Francisco Sirielto, rather than being deployed as an out-and-out centre-back, has kind of moved into that defensive midfield position, which for me is quite interesting. It's not something I really expected Valerian Ismail to implement. Is that something you think Sierralta is capable of doing going forward? Do you think he'll start there against QPR next weekend? Or do you think that's kind of an option where if we have to do it, we'll do it, but ideally we'll play someone else in that position?
It terrifies me, Sierralta in centre mid. It terrifies me deep into my soul. He should have been sent off about 3 times for 6 different yellow card offences against Crystal Palace, and that was in 45 minutes. I think he demands the ball and he looks to find a pass, which is all well and good, but he's not finding those passes often enough for me. I hope we'll look to bring in another DM and it'll be another one of those. If we have to do it, we can, but we'd prefer not to. I hope he doesn't start against
QPR.
QPR. That's the one. And I think a lot of Watford fans are forgetting is Imran Loser can play in that position as well.
I'm not. I wouldn't say. I mean, you say you can play in that position. Are you talking more of like a deep line playmaking position rather than?
I think he is more of a deep line playmaker, but he has got a good challenge on him. He can win the ball. It's just about that physicality, which I don't think he has. So yeah, like I say, in an ideal world, we'll bring in another DM or a more physical one that can play on the ball a bit more than Sierralta can. I hope he doesn't start against QPR, but unless we sign someone, we've got no one else to play there other than Livermore, who I also hope doesn't start against QPR. So did I say West Brom earlier? I think I did.
Yes.
Anyway, doesn't matter. Oh well. Yeah, I hope he does.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do think maybe we will look to bring in someone else in that position, but I think we are already a little bit overloaded. I mean, let's talk about the players we do have in central midfield. We've got Imran Loser, Ismail Kone, Jake Livermore, as you mentioned, Francisco Sierralta, as we've seen, has been deployed in that position already. So yeah, hopefully we will bring someone else in. I think for me, it's a matter of whether Watford want to spend the money. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. And before we wrap up the podcast, one more transfer rumour to talk about, which for me, I found very, very exciting. We've been linked with 2 very different strikers, actually. One of them being Kiefer Moore, he used to play at Cardiff City, now at Bournemouth in the Premier League. And the other one being Alfredo Morelos, formerly of Rangers in the Scottish First Division. Finn, very quickly, what are your thoughts on them 2 rumours? Because they're very different players. Morelos, obviously formerly of Rangers, is a very controversial player, very exciting. He's got a lot of personality. Would he suit this Watford team currently, or is he a player you'd maybe look to steer clear of?
I would definitely steer clear of Morelos, mainly because of the fact that him and Ryan Porteous have an ongoing, we'll say, dispute, and I think one of them would kill each other in training. Apart from that, on the footballing side of things, what I personally want a team of Watford players that I can get behind, whether they lose, draw, or win. As long as they run around, they try their hardest. And I don't think Morelos is that guy. Kiefer Moore, on the other hand, I don't know too much about. I know he's not your typical target man. He's got a bit of pace, and he can run in behind occasionally, go into the channels. Kiefer Moore I prefer to Morelos, but I think there's better options than both of them out there somewhere. But Kiefer Moore wouldn't be a bad signing. Morelos, I think, would be a bad signing.
I absolutely agree. And I think we'll leave it there on the striker talk. Before we go, Finn, obviously Watford are playing QPR next Saturday in the first game of the season. The fixture was originally meant to have been played at Loftus Road. However, unfortunately, their pitch could not be ready in time. So they asked Watford to switch the fixture to Vicarage Road, which we obviously gladly accepted. Does it maybe put some additional pressure on Valerian Ismail, the fact that it's his first game in charge of the club in front of fans, and the fact it's been held at home? Or do you think, Finn, that maybe that can be played to our advantage and maybe will help Watford towards a first victory?
From Ishmael's point of view, I'd be glad it would be at home, because you get one first game. If your first game's at home, you get one first game. You're in front of the fans. You're at home. It's your first home game. If your first game's away, or your first couple of games are away, you've then got to wait another 2 weeks until it's your first home game, which builds the pressure even more, especially if you've had a bit of a bad start. So yeah, if I was Ishmael, I'd be glad it's at home. Yeah, I'd be glad it's at home. Yeah, I really haven't got anything else to say.
And do you think Watford will win, Finn? That's my final question to you. Obviously, QPR, I think they've just finished their pre-season as Watford have, and they lost 5-0 to Oxford United in their final pre-season game. Gareth Ainsworth is the QPR manager. They do have some really talented players. I'm a big fan of Elias Chair and Chris Willock. I think they're really, really good and could play for any Championship club, really, maybe even some Premier League clubs at a push. But yeah, QPR, Finn, next Saturday, 3 p.m. kickoff. First game of the season. Is it going to end in a Watford victory?
Yes. Well, I reckon it'll be 2-0 to Watford. Vacuum Bayo to score a brace. But no one else will end up losing 3-0. So,
Okay, again, there's pessimistic thing coming out once again. Yeah, to kind of summarize the podcast and finish off there, I do think, I mean, look, we're always going to say we hope Watford will win. I do think we will win. First game of the season, a new era for Watford under Valère and Ismaël. We've had a massive squad clear out. Hopefully the crowd are up for it. Hopefully the weather's nice, because in the UK the weather hasn't been particularly great at the moment. But yeah, as Finn says, 2-0 Watford win. I'll go with that. Vacuum Bio at the double. And yeah, hopefully we start the season with a win. Finn, thank you so much for joining me today. Obviously, you run your own Watford account on Instagram, which is by the name of Watford FC Hub, I believe. So if you want to find Finn at Watford FC Hub on Instagram, I'm sure he'll be glad to see you over there. Finn, you kind of cover all the latest news, transfer news, your own personal opinion as well. So if you like Finn, if you like the look of Finn and you want to go check his page out, it's at Watford FC Hub on Instagram. Apart from that, thank you so much for joining me here on the Watford Way today. Please subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on audio platforms, make sure to give us a 5-star rating. And apart from that, we'll see you again very, very soon. Bye-bye.